What's up everyone, my name is Mark Hawk and today we're doing a quick side-by-side with the GoPro Hero 4 Silver Edition up against the new Garmin Verb X. Now we're going to put these cameras through a variety of tests, so you can use any of these quick links above to jump to the section you're most interested in. Otherwise sit back and we'll start playing them all in just a second. If this footage looks familiar to you, just keep in mind that we did film with a bunch of cameras to do a bunch of comparisons a few months ago, and we're just playing catch up with the side-by-sides we didn't do. So with that out of the way, let's get to it. We're going to start off by taking a look at what each of these cameras does best at 30 frames a second. Now, initially we're going to start off with 2.7K, but we're also going to dabble into comparisons that have 1080p, as well as different frame rates. Now, with the Hero 4 Silver on the left side of the screen, it can do 2.7K at 30 frames a second, so that's the highest resolution, while still maintaining a frame rate that I would consider acceptable. And with the Verb X on the right side of your screen, that's going to be 1080p at 30 frames a second. It can't actually do anything higher than 1080p. While it's easy to get caught up on things like color profile, what we really want to look for here, especially in this beginning scene, is things like clarity and sharpness and detail. Take a look at the lower left of each of these. Look at the fine detail in the grass and sort of the bugs and the sort of moving tall grass. On the Hero 4 Silver on the left side of your screen, you can definitely see a lot more of the individual blades as they sort of blow in the wind. You notice on the Garmin Verb X in the lower left, everything's kind of sort of splotchy and muddy. Everything on the Hero 4 Silver definitely has a much nicer edge. We have very nice detail, but it's a little more washed out, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But with the Garmin Verb X, you have a really nice series of contrast. Things like the gradiated sky in the background, we're not seeing any weird clipping or sort of artifacts, so that's a good sign. What you see on a lot of action cameras with these small image sensors, sometimes areas that have a very similar color, and as they slowly go from like one shade of blue to another shade of blue, depending on sort of the compression or the color profile, a lot of times we could see weird clipping or sort of a distortion in the sky. It's just the way the camera is handling how it handles like various shades of color that are all similar. Now, if we have a wide, let's say we have a wide sort of color profile, we have more shades of blue. So think on the left side of the screen, maybe we have 24 shades of blue, while on the right side of the screen, we maybe only have 16 shades of blue. So some of those shades of blue will actually be the same color. Now, if you were looking at that last shot, when we got towards the horizon line, you probably notice some sort of dancing boxes. That's sort of the clipping issues I'm talking about that we want to keep an eye out for, as well as sort of like black levels on the Garmin Verb X on the right side of your screen. Take a look at the trees and the branches and stuff like that. We just have a lot of rich black areas. There's not a lot of detail. If you look at some of those tree branches in the foreground and in the midground, take a look at the branches and the areas. Like, we have really nice dark areas, but we're still retaining a lot of that detail in the trees. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to switch between 2.7K and 1080p on the Hero on the left side of the screen. Take a look again at that grass on the lower left of your screen. When we're at 1080p, we're actually seeing a lot more detail. Even on that sort of rock face, there's a bit more contrast, there's a bit more harsh edges, and there's just a very nice defined line when we're at 1080p, 30 frames a second, which is odd because you would maybe consider that the highest resolution or the highest quality would give you the best results, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the lower settings will actually give you a better result, and in this case 1080p and I believe 1440p on the GoPro Hero 4 Silver is going to give you sort of the maximum potential you can achieve with these cameras. Now that shouldn't really deter you from using 2.7K. It wasn't a huge quality difference we were seeing there, but it's enough to sort of point out. And that weird sort of 2-pixel repeating edge you see at the bottom of the Garmin X is happening within the camera, and it's nothing I'm doing on my end. Now both of these cameras do offer multiple field of views, which is a great option to have and allows us to eliminate some of the natural lens distortion by cropping in on the image sensor. Now both the GoPro and the Garmin Verb offer 3 levels of zoom: wide, medium, and narrow, but on the Garmin it's referred to as zoom and ultra zoom for those lower two. And then the Hero 4 Silver also has something called Super View, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Now take a look at things like the wheel well here. Before I mentioned that areas like the dark areas and the blacks, some of them get clipped and we lose information. So if we change sort of the black levels and we're adjusting in post, or even if we want to retain some of that detail for later, switching to things like a flat color mode like we've done here, we can definitely see that there's a lot more detail underneath the wheel. So if we were to bring that sort of flat color graded footage into editing software, we have a lot more range because, again, we're dealing with many more shades of color. So you can see here we can just sort of adjust sort of our black levels and white levels. That's what that sort of curve here is on the bottom here. And it's really easy to adjust colors because we just have a bigger range to mess around with. Now with the Garmin Verb X, we just don't have as wide of a palette to mess with. Now that's not to say since it's a fairly neutral color grade, we can tint it sort of cooler or warmer fairly easy. But again, if we're trying to retain some of those black levels, we are losing those, but that might not be something that's a concern to you. One area I'd kind of want to point you to watch out for is edges in this scenario. So if you have a really bright background and you have something in the foreground that's also fairly bright, similar to this bike here, sometimes really bright backgrounds can eat into your edges. So take a look at the spokes wheel on the Garmin Verb X and just look at it compared to the Hero 4 on the left side of your screen. You'll notice that the spokes have a little more detail over that bright background. Now, it wasn't that extreme in that last example, but if we're looking at something like a rising sun and then we have like a street post in the middle, you'll see those sort of issues come up with eating into edges. And again, on top of that, the Garmin Verb X being a little more blotchy and a little bit softer, it definitely eats away at some of that detail that we want. Now, originally when we went to go film this video, we went up to Snow Summit. We were going to do a bunch of mountain biking, and unfortunately we ran into this huge forest fire, and we kind of just had to kill those plans, and we basically just started to cover a lot of the rescue efforts that went towards trying to put out the fire. Now, we had access to just looking at these tremendous helicopters coming in, sucking up water at a Big Bear Lake, and then just sort of dumping it to basically rush to rescue a bunch of houses. It was really spectacular. Also allowed us to have amazing opportunities like this. So right now, both of these cameras are not in their waterproof case, and we're going to see how the water droplets hit the lens. Now, the Hero 4 Silver on the left has a smaller window, well, basically a smaller window that water droplets can land onto, but if we had the waterproof case on it, you can imagine how much that surface area is going to collect more water. Now, the Garmin Verb on the left basically has a very similar cover as the Hero 4 Silver would in its waterproof case, and you can just see how the sort of highlights and the specs are kind of hitting with the water droplets. So if you're going to use this camera as sort of a dash cam or for motorcycles and stuff, and you're going to be exposed to the elements, this is something to keep in mind, because sometimes you want to be able to see through that water and that detail just in case you need it for emergency purposes. Like if you're raining and you get into a bike wreck and you need it for insurance purposes, you want to retain as much detail as possible. So maybe something like the Garmin X, you're going to want to get some type of solution to make sure those water droplets don't stick to it as much, or do one of a bunch of different tricks that you can use to make sure water droplets don't sort of stay on there as much. I think before I said the Garmin Verb X wasn't in a waterproof case. Actually, it's built into a waterproof case, so my bad. Basically, there's no way to take it out of its case, but right out of the box, it can go underwater. It's completely waterproof, flat lens, so your underwater quality is going to be nice and crisp. I do believe, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do an underwater test for this video at the time. We just didn't get around to it for one reason or another. Hero 4 Silver, of course, is going to come with a flat lens waterproof case. Very standard if you're familiar with the GoPro line of cameras. They all come with a waterproof case and can dive fairly deep. But the Verb X, there's really some nice benefits to basically built-in features. We have a lot of sensor data in there that we can use to overlay on top of footage. If you're interested in the Garmin Verb X, take a look at some of the other quick looks we've done on the Verb Edit software. Basically, while we're filming this, it's retaining a bunch of data from built-in devices to give us things like GPS, G-forces, rotation, all sorts of interesting stuff, and then it can be paired with a bunch of other devices, such as a heart rate sensor. You can hook it up to a more accurate GPS device. You can even hook it up to a car sensor, so if you're on a racetrack and you want really accurate data fed into the camera, it can do all that, and it really sort of makes that camera much more powerful in those type of situations. Again, here we're switching between 1080p and 2.7K. Take notice of things like branch detail. So as we zoom in here, take a look at the branches on the left side of your screen and even the cloud detail in the background. Notice how in the Hero 4 Silver there's multiple layers of color, while in the Garmin Verb X a lot of the colors are very similar and they start to blend into one another. There's still a good level of quality there. It's just comparing those sort of dynamic ranges in color between the two, but you know, the Garmin Verb X does have a really nice contrast if you're not going to mess around with colors. You know, that's definitely something right out of the box you don't have to worry about. Again, when we're looking at things like clarity, look at the street sign, look at the bricks on the left. I guess you can't really see it with the Verb X here. But, you know, again, we just have a really nice layer of quality with the Hero 4 Silver. Even in most of these flat scenarios, both cameras have done a really good job of having a very nice, neutral, and appealing color balance. Now, when we switch that to time-lapse and we leave everything on auto, you can see the Verb X has a really hard time of sort of picking a white balance and sticking to it. It's a little sensitive, while in the Hero 4 Silver, right out of the box, just doing a time-lapse was fairly easy, and with both of these cameras, we have multiple second options. I know with the Hero 4 Silver, we can even do half seconds. I'm not too sure we can do that with the Garmin Verb X. I believe it's 1, 5, and then again intervals. There's no sort of half-second option. I could be wrong on that though, I can't quite remember. So both of these cameras can do higher frame rates. With the VIRB X on the right side of your screen, we can do 60 frames a second at 720p. Now at 720p with the Hero 4, we can do 120 frames a second. This basically allows us to do 4 times 25% speed and still retain a really smooth motion. You can see here, as we slow it down to 25%, everything's just like really crisp and smooth. We can see all like the detail in the blades spinning. One sort of mistake I made with the Garmin VIRB on the right side of your screen, I believe I had it in zoom mode, so they're both not on wide, but the next example I believe is corrected here. So again, 60 frames a second on the right side of your screen, 120 on the left. Both of these are being slowed down right now to about 50%, and I think now they're at 25%. There's definitely a nice sort of smooth grain look to the Garmin VIRB X on the right side of your screen. But again, we're just having a lot more ripple detail here on the left side of the screen. We do have a higher frame rate. We can just see a lot more detail in those rotor blades. But man, like, so when you have certain hertz, and certain frame rates going, and you slow them down, like just the way the sort of tail rudders and stuff like that can look really cool. Because at 60 frames a second, the tail rudder will seem really, really slow. And at 120 frames a second, the main rotor will seem really, really slow. So you switch those around, it's a little interesting. I really like helicopters, so only reason why I sort of point that out. So again, on the left side of your screen here, take a look at the pine needles and stuff over the blue sky, because that's, it's a pretty bright background. The sun's starting to set. We have golden hour. We have really interesting shadows, and it makes for a really interesting composition. And even when we're pointing both of these cameras at the sun, the contrast is good. Neither camera is really overexposing it too bright to keep, it's basically taking the whole frame into consideration. It's not taking just what's in the center of the screen and bumping up the values from there. Now, both of these cameras can give you the option to go in if you want to do that, but if you're moving, that's going to cause a lot of strobing. And frankly, this is a test to make sure both of these cameras handle contrast situations really well. Same here, we have a really bright sun in the background, but nothing is getting sort of lit in a really weird way. Nothing's getting crunched down in a really weird way. We have a nice balance plate on both of these cameras. Look at the quality on things like those windows on the right side of the screen. The CNN building is also another really good area to see a lot of detail here. Again, VIRB X has a lot of versatility when it comes to sort of external devices and pulling data, and it still retains a nice little image. The Hero 4 Silver definitely given us a ton of range we've seen in color. The sharpness and quality clarity is there. It is a little washed out, but if you're willing to do some sort of work in post-production, you basically retain a lot of that information there as well. And that's sort of similar to the benefits of the VIRB X. If you want to retain a lot of that data that it's using, you have to do some post work. But now we're going to do some audio work, and I'll shut up. Anyway, guys, right now we're going to be doing a sound test between these two cameras. So we're going to play some music here, and we're also going to use the sound of my voice just to determine how the quality is between these two cameras. So let's get to it.
You didn't close the door, left a crack open. I couldn't ignore the fact possibility of having hope in this insanity that we still could be, but we're stuck. To see me.
So what we've done real quick is we've opened up the door of the Garmin VIRB X. Now, in most scenarios, you won't have the door open, but since it is a submerged case, it's going to muffle that audio quite a bit. So this is the true potential of it. Even though most scenarios will have the door closed, let's just test it out. Now, like I mentioned in the video, the VIRB X is in a waterproof housing most of the time you're filming, so your sound is a little flatter, it's a little more muffled, but I'd say it's more on the flat side than it is the muffled. Hero 4 Silver definitely gives a really great range of sound and a really good bass. It's really good with ambient sounds, not so much directional sounds, but for the most part, both cameras should do a pretty good job with audio, but I'll definitely lean towards the Hero 4 Silver. Now, if we had the Hero 4 Silver In its waterproof housing, that sound obviously would be very muffled and have that very typical sort of GoPro audio. Now real quick, as we're looking at nighttime footage here, on the Hero 4 Silver we have a few ISO options. Now with a new update, the 3.0 update, you can turn your ISO to about 3200. That's generally where I like to keep it, and if I am filming at night, I try and keep it somewhere around 24 to 30 frames a second. This will allow us to get the most light and the most amount of non-motion blur, while also not making everything too dark. Now 3200 is going to give us a bit of grain, but it's going to be kind of our best trade-off as opposed to doing 6400 that's too bright or 1600 that's too low. Now the Garmin Verb is a little bit green. Again, we're having some of those quality issues, but having these small image sensors at night is always a challenge with action cameras, and none of them really do it super reliably. Maybe the Sony line of action cameras have always been sort of my go-to camera if I have to film in low light or night. But with both of these cameras, you know, it's a really small image sensor. We need a lot of light, or we're going to get a lot of motion blur. Now both of these cameras are filming with a 12 megapixel image sensor at a resolution of 4000 by 3000. Now this is a 4:3 aspect ratio, and the benefit of this, similar to filming in 1440p, is it gives us extra field of view at the top and the bottom. Now similar to Super View on the GoPro Hero 4 Silver, we're actually going to take that top and bottom and actually squish it down into a 16:9 image. That's the equivalent of Super View. Now you can download all of these images in RAW in the more information section below this video, so you can check out the quality yourself. Again, if you're viewing this video outside of YouTube, check out markhawcam.com or markhawcam on YouTube for that link. Both of these cameras just offer a really great range and sort of photo quality. Now the really nice thing about the Garmin Verb X is it has a tactile button on the top of the camera dedicated for taking photos, as well as a tactile switch that you can flip forward to start recording a video. So if you're wearing something like gloves, you could just reach up, flip that forward and hear a nice click and feel it through the glove as well. And then if you want to take a photo but not sort of switch the mode to video to photo, you can actually just press that top button and just take a photo with no issue. Hero 4 Silver also offers a lot of shutter control, so if we're in a low light scenario, we tell the shutter to stay open for much longer. We have a bunch of color profile options, ISO options. The Hero 4 Silver, along with the LCD screen on the back, makes taking photos a lot of fun, and just sharing those photos right away a really great experience. Anyway, before you go, please like and subscribe. Sharing these videos helps me out immensely, and if you're feeling super generous, head on over to my Patreon page. Patreon's a way that you guys can support YouTubers such as myself, because a lot of what you see on MarkhawCam is paid for out of my pocket, so any support you can give me would be super helpful. But if you don't have any money to donate, pressing like or sharing is actually almost just as good, because it exposes it to new viewers, which is also always awesome for us. Anyway, I'm Mark Hawk. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below, and as always, I'll see you out there. Have a good one, everyone.